All right, welcome back to StackCast. In this video, we'll be talking about writing a program from scratch, and we'll go over writing a program for a new lifter or an existing client. And the format of this video will be cut into two pieces. The first piece is collecting data, which will give us a lifter profile. And once we have created a lifter profile, we can identify some limitations that this lifter is dealing with. And once we have all this information collected, then we can jump into the programming piece of it that will solve these issues. And we said there is a data collection piece to it. And if you have a new client reaching out to you, the process is going to be the same as it is for an existing client, but we need to collect a little bit more data for a new client because we haven't had a lot of conversations with them. We haven't spent enough time with this lifter to know how they move, and we haven't collected this data. So we do need to do a little bit more work for a new lifter beforehand, before we write a program, just because there's a lot of information that is missing. So the first step in the process is the data collection piece, and with that we are trying to create a lifter profile. And within this lifter profile we have two buckets, and the first bucket, I think of it as the constraints we have to deal with, and the other bucket is the adaptation status. So some examples as far as the constraints go is things like schedule, things like morphology, leverages, and some examples as far as the adaptations go is their muscle mass, what their technique looks like, what their movement looks like, and within those things we can start to find some limitations. Once we identify those limitations, we can jump into the constraints we have to play with, how much recovery budget we have to actually address those limitations. And for the data collection piece, there's a few ways to do it. You can either sit down with the lifter and talk to them in person or over a video call, or the way I like to do it, I like to do a combination of both, where I sit down with the lifter and have them fill out a form. Within this form, I have a few pieces of information I'm trying to collect, and some of them are age, weight, height, leverages in general, which will tell me which lift this lifter can do with minimal effort. Maybe like if the person has long arms, I know that they're built well to deadlift, and the deadlift is not going to be as costly. But if they have like super short arms, maybe they're a little bit older, maybe a little bit taller, then I know the deadlift is going to be a little bit more costly. So it's going to give me a reference of how much recovery resources we have to use for each lift. And the next one would be training history, looking at their previous programming, seeing like how they responded to specific protocol. If they've done twice a week squatting and it didn't go well, we combine it with some feedback as far as they felt, I guess, like under simulated, they felt over recovered. Then we know, okay, well, maybe that wasn't enough. The next one is injury status. And injury status is pretty self-explanatory. If we know this person is dealing with injuries or had a history of specific injuries, then we know how to tailor a program to maybe avoid loading specific areas or pacing things a little bit slower. Next one is schedule, and schedule will tell us, okay, how much time we actually have in the gym to work on those limitations, work on acquiring those adaptations. So if a person can train 3 days a week versus 6 days a week, that will change the whole structure of the program. Next one is past coaching experience and expectations from the new coach. And this is more about creating buy-in, because like you want to create a program that the person will enjoy doing, even if it is something that is supposed to work really well on paper. If the buy-in is not there, it might not work well. Last couple would be the recovery habits and like their work schedule. How much recovery resources we have to play with. If the person is in a deficit and they don't recover well, they don't sleep well, their work is fairly demanding, maybe we can't give them that much work. If it's a person who is in college and like they don't have a lot of work hours and they're sleeping really well, sleeping 8+ hours, they're eating really well, we know we have a lot more resources to work with. And the last one is the gym, what equipment they have available to them, which will obviously tell us what variations we can actually give them, what variations we have to avoid just based on what equipment they have available to them. And for the other part of the lifter profile, which is the adaptation status, we'll start off with the technique. What does the lifter's technique look like? And the reason why that's important is because it will influence how much work they can recover from. If the person is super efficient, they can probably do a little bit more work, versus someone who is inefficient, they're probably not going to be able to do a lot of volume within that movement. So it will just give us a starting point of how much workload we should give that person, and if we should add some variations to help improve this person's technique. So some constraints, exercise selection constraints, where we can improve a specific quality within the person's technique. So if we know the person has a technique limitation, then we can start adding some exercise variations, things like longer pauses, tempos, to emphasize specific parts of their technique that we want to work on. And the next thing I like to look at is how the person moves. As far as symmetry goes, if they have a significant hip shift or a lot of extension or flexion bias, I like to know that and see how it looks like on their SBD stuff. So once I design a program, I can add in maybe some single leg work or some things that will bias a lot of extension or flexion, so we're actually filling in the gaps as far as the movement goes. And the next one is hypertrophy. So how much muscle mass does this person have on their frame? And if we know this person hasn't been training for too long, or they haven't done a lot of bodybuilding work, then we know how much resources we want to put into the hypertrophy work. And the last one is strength. So if there is a strength problem, your lifter is showing up fairly weak on the days you want him to show up strong, then we might start adding in some lifts that work on this high force production, things like heavy bell squats, or adding a little bit more heavy back downs or heavy squatting, benching, and deadlifting to stimulate this high force production, to stimulate this strength. Or there could be a fatigue problem if the person is doing way too much and they're showing up overly fatigued and they can't really produce high amounts of force on the days you want them to. So now that we've collected all this information, now it's time to start writing the program. And chances are, if you've collected all this information, you've found some limitations, some problems the person is dealing with, causing them to stall on their progress. I'll start with the person's schedule. If they can train, let's say 5 days a week, I'll write down those days. So maybe start with Monday, Tuesday, and Saturday. This will kind of give me an idea of how many days we can actually work with. And if we already established that this person needs a specific frequency on their SBD, I'll start with that. So adding in how many times we're going to squat, bench, and deadlift. So this is going to be my program. So I'm going to be squatting 3 times a week, benching, let's say 5 times a week, and deadlifting twice. And once we established those two, the frequency and the days we're going to be training, then it's about filling those things in. And for me, I know I need a specific exposure timing between those lifts. So we have squat 1, 2, and 3. 1 is your primary day. 2 is the secondary, and so on and so forth. And I know maybe I need 2 days in between my secondary squat and the primary squat. The heavier squat is going to be, let's say, on Thursday, so you can work backwards. I put my maybe squat 1 here on the Thursday, then I know my second squat is going to have to be 2 days prior, or we need 2 days of rest. So the squat 1 is going to be on Monday, because that gives me Tuesday and Wednesday off. Then I squat heavy on Thursday. Then I can fill in my last squat, which will be in between those, so on Saturday. And you can add in which variation those are going to be. So I'm probably going to do high bar on my squat 2, maybe do a pause squat, but still push those fairly heavy. And this day is going to be comp squat. Then I start filling in deadlift, because I like to finish squats and deadlifts first. Then I put bench wherever it fits. And let's say for this, I'm going to have Tuesday and Saturday. So that will give me a 3-day gap, or depending on which day you want to be the heavier day and the lighter day. For me, I need 2 days to actually peak my deadlift. So my heavier deadlift is going to be on, on Tuesday, after 2 days of rest. Deadlift Saturday, take Sunday, Monday off. I am training on Monday, but taking those 2 days, then deadlift heavy on Tuesday. Now it's a matter of kind of filling in the bench, and I'm training 5 days a week and I'm benching 5 days a week. So I'm going to be benching on all of these days. Then I'll be able to fill in which days I want to be the heavier days and which days I want to be the lighter days. So within this structure, my heaviest bench day is going to be on Thursday. My second heaviest is actually going to be on Tuesday. Then my fourth heaviest bench day is going to be on Saturday. Monday is going to be third, and Friday is going to be the easiest bench day. And that way I am peaking my Thursday bench, and like I know how heavy I need to push on each day. Then after that, I start filling in the supplemental work, the accessories I want to have in there. So for my case, let's say I want to add in hack squats for the lower body, maybe like a hinge pattern, then adding in some upper body accessories, depending on what the limitation is. And like for my case here, I have a limitation as far as, I guess, protraction, upward rotation, and kind of getting out of extension. So things that will let me protract the shoulders, go overhead. So maybe like an incline chest press, and things like high reach rows, and so on. You can fill in whichever accessories you want to add in here. If they have a specific purpose, it can be a movement purpose, it can be hypertrophy, it can be for technique, but you can put in all of these things you want to fit in the program on the sheet of paper here, or I guess on the Word document, then start filling them in within the program. Once I have all these established, it's just a matter of filling them in the days. And like once all of these things are filled in, then I go into the Excel sheet where I fill in the exercise selection and exercise order. Then from there, it's a matter of filling in the sets, reps, RPE, load selection, the pacing of the block, and how long the block is going to be. All right, so now that we figured out our exercise selection, exercise order, and the days we're going to train, we just fill those in the program here. And the only thing that is left is to fill in the sets, reps, the RPE, and maybe give some load suggestions. I'll start with the sets and reps. I know that the block is going to be 3 weeks long, so I'm going to pace my, I guess, like exertion in a specific way. Depending on the lift, we'll add in the RPE here. And once we have the RPE or reps in reserve already written down, and we know what the pacing is going to be like, we know by, let's say, week 3, because like I found for myself, I respond well to 3-week blocks, and like having that 4th week be the easier deload week. Okay, so we have our 3 weeks filled in with the sets, reps, and the pacing of the exertion or the RPE. And at this point, we can add in, I guess like we can add in some load selection, some pacing. So if we know we want to end with 215 roughly on week 3, maybe like somewhere between, let's say, 210 and 215, then we can work backwards and give the ranges there if we want to jump 7.5 kilos or so between each week. So we can give ourselves 200 to 207, then work backwards here and maybe start with like roughly around 190 to 200, and then you can fill in the rest of the cells here. And now you have a complete program, everything from exercise selection, order, the days you want to train, the days you don't want to train, the RPE selection, and the pacing of the RPE from week to week, the block length, the sets, and the reps, and this is everything you need to build a program. Okay, so to summarize how we ended up with this program, we said there is a data collection part to creating a program. You need to know what limitations you have to work with, morphology, constraints, time constraints, or other constraints, and expectations. So like once that's established, we know how much resources we have to play with. Within those limitations, we can move on to the adaptations that we need to acquire. And if we know we have some limitations as far as maybe hypertrophy or movement limitations or technique, then we know how to create a program around those. For this example, the limitations are hypertrophy is a big limiter here. And like the other one is movement limitations. For me here, I have a lot of, I guess, like hip shifting and like twisting problems. And like if those are addressed, usually my training starts to feel better. So like the programming here is tailored towards keeping the strength expression high, but also working on bringing up the hypertrophy of the legs and bringing up some movement limitations, things like ability to protract the shoulders, ability to get into upward rotation and get out of extension for this example. So you see a lot of exercises here that are tailored towards driving a bit more flexion, driving a little bit more protraction of the shoulders to fill in this movement gap. Technique is not a problem. Strength itself is not a problem. It's just like those are the things that limit strength expression when movement is not there, when hypertrophy is not addressed. If we're not maintaining a specific amount of hypertrophy work, then the strength expression starts to suffer. Yeah, I think starting with a Word document to kind of lay out your thought process, which exercises you want to add in, how much SPD frequency you're going to have in the program, filling those in, then moving on to filling in the sets, reps, RPE, pacing of the block, and some suggested loads for those weeks would finish the whole program. And with that being said, this is the video for this week, and we'll see you guys next week.